Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 179 of our little podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm down here in the bunker near the Omphalos with my good friend and co-host, Dr. David C. Noe.
Yeah, what's the T in Winkle stand for, man?
Goodness, man. I told myself I was going to prepare for this.
Were you?
Yeah.
Tremendous?
I'll take tremendous.
You'll
Why
take
not?
tremendous?
Why not? Yes.
All right.
Yeah. How are you feeling, Dave?
I'm feeling pretty well, thanks. I've got my Diet Fago here, genuine Fago. It's a delicious twist.
Oh, is this a new sponsor?
No,
That sounds suspicious.
I wish. Fago is the Michigan version here.
That's right. Yeah.
It's the I don't know, locally brewed soda. They don't brew soda.
Right. Whatever.
But Rock and Rye, you know that one?
I do.
The Fago Rock and Rye.
Yeah. Yeah.
You say it in such a way that you don't like it.
Well, I'm just not a big Faygo drinker. In fact,
I see.
until you just mentioned it, I wasn't even aware this was a Michigan brand.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Where
Faygo.
have you been?
I know Verner's is.
Verner's is a Michigan brand.
Yeah, but I was unaware about Faygo.
I think their slogan is the soda that burns your nose.
that it does. Yeah.
I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm ready for this Smarch madness to end.
Really?
Honestly.
Yeah.
Let's be done with the snow and the hail and the sleet and
Yep.
every kind of precipitation that Mother Nature can throw at us.
Exactly.
And let's get on to some springtime.
Yeah, Mother Nature, it happens every Smarch.
That's right.
Just can't seem to make up her mind.
No.
Yep. So I'm done with it too.
Today it's supposed to be almost 70 degrees, but
What?
overcast and windy.
Yeah.
So is that really spring? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah, we just got a few days left though, and
Yeah, you didn't ask me what the C in my name stands for.
You got something?
I do not.
You
It's a good
don't?
thing, because I don't know what it would be.
No, really nothing.
Capricious?
Capricious stuff?
Yes, I could change on you in an instant.
Right.
As
Yeah.
you've learned after 179 episodes.
Yes, I think that sounds very accurate.
Yes,
All
all
right.
right.
What are we
So,
talking about today, Dave?
we're going to be talking about Henri et René Marrou.
Oh, yes.
Before too long.
Yep.
History of Education in Antiquity. This is part 2
Yep.
and chapter 8.
Now it's getting complicated. There's too many Roman numerals. Right?
The man is attempting, my friend,
Yeah.
the man is attempting to cover thousands of years of educational history.
Yeah.
With a broad range of topics and
Yes.
so forth.
Yes.
He's trying to do something almost as difficult as move a major household appliance.
This sounds like this comes from a recent experience.
Yes, have you ever tried to do that?
Oh, yeah.
You ever had to move like a dishwasher, a washing machine, or
Yeah.
a dryer?
It involves like a trolley
it's-
and crazy amount of straps.
It's really incredible. So
and
one
if
time,
you have to move them like up and down stairs.
Oh,
too,
that's
it's
even worse.
Right. So
Yeah.
you got
well, one time I was trying to move, that that ice boxy thing that keeps your vegetables and your meats and your
of
dairy
course,
products
right. I know what
cold.
you're talking about. Yeah.
And I was feeling weary.
Yeah.
I was feeling small.
Okay.
There were tears in my eyes, and there was no one to dry them all.
Oh man.
So I'm taking this ice box, and I'm trying to move it up this long set of stairs.
Yeah. Oh, that's the worst.
And I've been going to the gym lately.
Yeah.
I've been trying to, live the healthy Herculean life and so
Right,
forth. So I
right.
thought I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this. So I, strapped it onto the trolley, and I'm pushing it up the stairs, and it's heavy, and I'm just really, I was down. Times were getting rough, and friends just couldn't be found.
Oh man, you got to have people to help you move, and you were flying solo.
It was really difficult.
Man.
It was really difficult. So I thought maybe I'll get some of my family to help.
Yes.
Maybe my girls, right?
Yeah.
So I have a couple girls, and I say, I asked my daughters, can you help me? So originally they were intent on helping me move this large stainless steel appliance
Yes.
up this heavy set of stairs.
Okay.
The kind that keeps your vegetables cold and
Yeah,
so forth.
Of course. Right.
But then when push came to shove,
Yeah.
they didn't do any pushing or any shoving.
Oh my goodness.
What they did is they just stood there, and they thought they could help me most by singing.
Oh, this just gonna make it worse.
It's going to make it worse.
Yes.
And they're both altos or sopranos.
Yeah.
There's no bass
Yeah. Okay.
in their singing, so it's kind of lovely but sort of high pitched.
Yeah. Tinny. Yeah.
Tinny.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to take this huge appliance, and finally I just said, ladies, if you're not going to help, I'm just going to try to just move it right over the top of you.
Oh goodness.
Which seems like what the kids would call a boss move, maybe.
Right. So they were not only singing at this point; they're in your way.
They're in my way.
Okay, all right.
And I was down and out.
Yeah.
I was on the street. Evening falls so hard, and there was no one to comfort me.
Man.
There was no one to take my part when darkness comes. And pain, you know this.
Oh, yeah.
Pain was all around.
All around, yeah.
And finally I realized that this is like a fridge over trebled daughters.
I knew it was coming, and I still,
You knew it was
I still
coming.
love it.
I will lay me down.
Right.
I didn't go into the third verse, but I thought about it with the refrigerator because remember earlier I was describing what kind of fridge it was.
It was a silver girl.
It was stainless steel.
Yes,
right?
exactly right.
Sail on, silver girl.
Right.
Your time has come to shine. All your dreams are on the way. See how they shine.
So from now on, you can refer to your fridge as Silver Girl.
Silver girl.
I might take
That's
that one
right.
home.
That's right. Simon and the Garfunkel.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
You a fan?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I like a lot of their music. Right. So, have you ever seen the movie The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman?
I know of it. No, I haven't seen it.
Which is
The song America, is that in there?
I forget. There's a number of Simon and Garfunkel songs
Okay.
that are going to make up that soundtrack. Probably most famously, Mrs. Robinson.
Oh, yes, I know
and
that song.
Sound of Silence. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, good stuff.
So I guess Paul Simon is the one who gets most of the credit. But
Yeah.
Garfunkel has an amazing voice.
His main voice. I mean, Simon did the vast majority of the songwriting.
Of the writing.
He's the musical genius. But yeah,
Right.
Garfunkel's voice is
Right.
is needed, that
Yeah.
blend. Yeah.
So people don't realize that Winkle's the genius behind this podcast.
I think they realize that by now.
Oh, do they? All right.
No. Yeah.
Sail on, Silver Girl.
All right. So we got to get into some Marrou here.
Yes, Marrou. But before,
Yes. Oh,
we have not another gag,
No.
but something that's actually going to be quite exciting, and
Yes.
that is
the drawing
Right.
For the ratio 4 contest.
that's correct.
So you have a list there.
I have a list of our entrants. As it turns out, there were 32 individuals who
Excellent.
submitted their name in
Great.
order to win the free ratio 4.
Mhm.
I put them into this little spreadsheet. No, we did not get Deloitte and Touche or Pricewaterhouse and Cooper or whatever fancy law firm because we decided we couldn't afford it.
Right.
I put all their names into this spreadsheet alphabetically, from 2 to 33, and then we go to this random number generator,
All right.
and I put the minimum number as 2
Mhm.
and the maximum number as 33, and when I push the generate button,
Yes.
it's going to spit out a number in that range. That number will correspond to someone's name.
Excellent. All right.
And Jeff is here. We're gonna check each other.
Yep.
And this will make sure that if the name that comes up is someone I don't like, I won't push the button again.
Right. Okay.
So it's a one push.
Yes. One push. That's it.
The listener can see my hands, right?
Yes.
Or-
Yep. Right
okay.
there. Both up in the air.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Generate. The number is
Yes.
32.
Oh goodness! Right near
Now,
the bottom.
who is number 32? Number 32 is Joanna Van Vliet.
Joanna Van Vliet.
Joanna Van Vliet, congratulations.
Congratulations.
We have to
Excellent.
put in some drum roll, some applause here. in order to
Fireworks,
celebrate.
Yeah.
Joanna has won the ratio 4. Congratulations. It will be on its way to your door as soon as we can secure your address. And I think they have to pay some taxes. I think it's like $1,000 or something.
Yeah. At least.
Yeah.
At least 1,000
And taxes and fees.
Right.
But the coffee maker's free, rest assured.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Fantastic. Congratulations, Joanna. And hopefully we can have another one of these contests
Absolutely.
down the line again. This
Thank
is
you
great.
to everyone who participated, who put their name in, and we're really sorry that you can't all win, but we'll be giving another one away before too long. All right, Jeff, so as we get going here on the episode proper, we try to give the people some of the intellectual heft, such as it is.
Yes.
I understand you're going to get us started with an opening quote.
Yes. So I found this in an article called Literate Education in Classical Athens by one T.J. Morgan from the Classical Quarterly back in 1999. So this doesn't directly comment on the subject of the Marrou chapter we're talking about today, which is about science and math.
Right.
But I think it does dabble into, in the Venn diagram, there's some overlap here.
Okay.
I thought this was interesting. So this comes, I took this from the middle of the article, where Morgan writes, in some of the same writers, so he's been quoting a number of ancient writers where we're getting different ideas about what education may have looked like in Athens. He says, in some of the same writers, we find a separate distinction being made between practical or technical education and what we might call a quote-unquote liberal one. Plato and Aristotle occasionally differentiate the education suitable for a free man and a private citizen from that of a demiurgos. Elsewhere, letters, musicae, gymnastics, lyre playing, or a combination of them are specified as the education suitable for eleutheroi or idiotai. Aristophanes plays with this idea in his play called The Knights.
Yes. May I interrupt for just a moment?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to define a couple of terms
Please.
here for the audience because they may not be familiar with this, the last part you quoted here. Specified as the education suitable for eleutheroi. Those would be anyone who's a free citizen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Or idiotai, which I take to be not as it sounds,
Right.
idiots, but the private citizen who has no involvement in the life of politics.
Exactly.
Okay.
Very, very good. Yes.
All right. So then what does Aristophanes say in the Knights?
Yes, and I have to admit that the real reason I chose this quote is because it quotes from Aristophanes, and I found it humorous.
I knew that.
But-
You just love your Aristophanes.
I do. So this is a dialogue between a couple of characters, which begins, "To which didaskalos, to which teacher, did you go as a boy? I was educated by blows in the slaughterhouse. Well, what wrestling did you learn from the Pythagoras, the child leader? To steal and perjure myself and look the other way. Well, what techne did you have on coming to manhood? Sausage selling."
He was the hot dog peddler.
Exactly.
That was his techne.
Exactly right. So Morgan continues, says, "The joke lies in the inappropriate nature of the sausage seller's responses, from which we infer that a practical education, one that equips the people to survive and make a living in a hard world, is the reverse of what one would expect from didaskaloi and paidotribai."
So, if I may, Morgan is going to explain the joke to us?
No, he's calling attention to it.
Okay.
Right. He's saying that the humor lies in how the sausage seller, his experience is such at odds with a more elite education.
Okay.
Right. We cannot be sure on the basis of this passage whether professional training is allied with banausic, but now there's a word for you.
Yeah. It's a Greek word.
Yeah, lower level.
That's right.
Or whether it forms a third dimension of liberal education. Professions such as medicine are often distinguished from banausic skills and recognized in our sources as requiring special training. But it is rare for such training to be discussed in connection with literate or cultural education. It seems most likely that both banausic and professional training are to be distinguished from literate-based education, which in turn reinforces the elitist image of literate and literary education, with consequences to which we shall return below. So I thought this was an interesting distinction.
Okay.
That at least thus far, Marrou hasn't really spent a lot of time, talking about the dividing line. He seems to be focusing on the literary, kind of the secondary, and
right.
kind of the elite education, and isn't taking into consideration what we might call more like skill center stuff, right?
Yes. Well, very early on in Marrou, which was our first episode on this fellow back in 1987, if memory serves.
Yeah.
Remember, he began to set this out as the triumph of the scribe over the man of valor on the battlefield.
Right.
The hero. This is, as we refer to it, it's revenge of the nerds.
Yes.
The rise of a scribe culture, replacing, the strong and brutish kind of guy that just hunts and fights.
Right.
But I guess this is a little bit different emphasis, because this would be the triumph of the scribe over the blue collar guy.
Right.
You know who what is his name?
Mike Rowe.
Yeah, Mike Rowe.
Yeah, dirty jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's kind of made a living, hasn't he?
Yes.
On the notion that we have to bring back the trades.
Yeah.
And that the trades are honorable, that they're noble, and they oughtn't to be looked down on.
No, very true.
How does that hit you?
No, this is something I'm very interested in, especially as my kids are kind of on the cusp of kind of going up to college or thinking about college and thinking about what they might want to do for a living.
Yeah.
And but I don't remember if we've talked about what our experiences with this was, but I remember shamefully, like in high school, that the kids who went off to skills center, who did like auto shop,
you looked down on them, didn't you?
I mean, it was a joke that these kids they weren't serious students, right? And so there was a kind of built-in elitism.
Yeah,
that's what you do if you're not smart enough,
for
college
to go to college.
My views on that have completely changed.
Yeah,
over the last 30 plus years now.
Yeah.
And so I do think that I read a lot about these kind of argument about we got to bring the trades back, especially because if everybody becomes a YouTuber or a podcaster, we're in big trouble.
Can't we all be influencers?
Right. So I don't know how accurate this stuff is.
Yeah.
But they project out there's going to be a shortage of electricians and plumbers and
welders,
and there's just not going to be people that are going to do that because people aren't going into the trade.
That's right.
Yeah,
they're not interested in things bonosic.
No,
right. So my experience was that, at least in my small rural public high school setting here in West Michigan, outside the orbit of the Dutch Reformed schools, at least, was that people were often slotted that way more by the perception of the teachers and advisors than by their actual talent. So I had a friend who was a brilliant young man, but I guess the teachers decided based on his background, his family circumstances, something like that, he should go into a trade. But he routinely scored higher on math and science exams and so forth than many of the other classmates whose parents were lawyers and dentists and so forth. Yeah. So that seemed a little bit like typecasting.
Yeah. Right.
And so I wondered about that. So I guess the Mike Rowe bit is he's kind of trying to make these trades respectable. Yeah. So people think this is a good option.
Right. Exactly. I think that, in the moment where we're at where college tuition costs they're insane.
Right.
And so from him and others, I've often heard the argument says not only will the trades get you a well-paying job, it's going to cost you a fraction of what it would going off to a 4-year university would. Yeah.
Well, one theme that you and I have touched on many, many times, so that longtime listeners of the podcast would know this, is that maybe to differing degrees, but I think we both share the conviction that the humanities should not be studied as a career end.
Yeah. Right.
Don't study them as a career end. In fact, selling this to kids, study the humanities so that you can have a better job, is a little bit of is false advertising.
Yeah, no,
bait and switch.
Exactly. Yeah, I think every classics department office I've ever been a part of, as a professor or as a student, has had that copy of Careers for Classicists floating around. You got to do it, right?
Careers for Classicists is like an index card, right? It's a 3x5 and it's blank on both sides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so this chapter of Marrou, chapter 8, it is entitled everybody's favorite subject, science.
Science.
Right.
Yes.
This is the STEM chapter.
Right. Now, I thought was really interesting is if I can point to kind of the overall arc of this.
Please point to the arc.
The kind of how Marrou describes the place of science in a kind of ancient curriculum. Right. It seems to have the opposite arc as what we see today, where today everything is STEM, and kind of these weak attempts to kind of incorporate arts into it and make it STEAM. Yeah. Right. But he seems to make the argument that mathematics and science, while it was kind of held up maybe as an ideal, it really never kind of found its place on the same footing as literary studies.
It fled the curriculum. Yeah. It was really interesting when we get down to some later portions. I know, Jeff, your original reaction to this chapter was a long suppressed yawn.
Well,
is that fair to say?
Well, I was kind of dreading it.
Okay.
Largely because science and math have never been my thing.
Yeah. And did they have any appeal for you in high school or anything?
No, not really. For my thing, it was always missing a story.
So a simple algebraic equation.
Oh, I hated algebra.
Like 4x equals 16?
No.
So x equals 4? There's a story there.
There's no story
Sure there is.
It's a boring story.
There is x sitting next to 4.
Yeah.
What is x thinking? You're not with me, are you?
No, I'm not.
X is thinking, what am I going to be? I could be anything. Wow. What do I want to become? It's
fantastic X, right? Just hand me the Odyssey. Right?
My life is variable. Right. And then look, he becomes 4 in order to equal 16. It's a coming of age story, isn't it?
Oh God.
You're not at all.
No, I think you are stretching, my good friend. No, I should say I had friends in high school and in college that were very good at math. Okay. And I always admired that the mind that could be one fascinated by it and one that could naturally kind of solve these equations.
So if you had been better at the mathing, you might have appreciated it more. Is that what you're saying?
Of course. Isn't that true of most human beings?
I don't know.
We're drawn to the things that we're naturally good at.
Yeah, but we're also drawn to the things that we're not good at.
So explain, please.
Okay. So I can't paint a Renaissance painting.
Right.
But the enormous gap between my napkin doodlings and a painting by Titian or Caravaggio, it's the size of the difference that just leaves me in such great awe.
Yeah.
In fact, the further away I get from being able to do something, in some ways, the more I appreciate it.
Yes.
So what about that
well,
counter
I would say
argument?
that even within that,
Okay.
I think you're probably pretty good at interpreting the art, right?
I see.
And so
I have a different kind of skill.
right. But no, I'm with you. I think that a fascination with genius,
Yeah.
right, and kind of standing in awe in front of a Caravaggio or the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Yeah, I think that will kind of gonna bring you to your knees in a particular way. That
Okay.
algebra or calculus just simply cannot. Not for me.
I thought
Not
that
for
you
me.
being a language guy, math is a kind of language, much like music.
We've talked. How many times on the show have we used the phrase "language is not math"?
Yeah,
right?
many times, but
Exactly.
math is language. It doesn't go the other way.
Well, equus doesn't equal horse.
Okay.
right. It's
all right.
So I think that. So that's where.
Are we going to come to blows so soon after the ratio 4 drawing?
No, we're not going to, because I think you're being a devil's advocate, and I think you agree with me.
Actually, I like math. So the chapter begins.
All right.
I love a chapter that begins with but, right? The very first word in this chapter is but.
Yes.
Now, any high school teacher of literature and composition will tell you, don't begin a sentence with and.
No. Exactly. Right.
But I don't think that's true.
No.
Begin a sentence with and. In fact, begin a book with and.
I would say begin a sentence with "and" way before you begin it with "but."
You think so? And the cheese stands alone, but the cheese stands alone?
I could read both those books.
All right.
Yeah.
But literature was not the only subject, says Marrou, on the secondary school syllabus. That's a good opening.
That's not bad. Right.
Both Plato and Isocrates, it will be remembered, agreeing for once, supported Hippias's contention that the study of mathematics was an excellent training for the mind.
Yes.
So there you go, Jeff.
Right. But ultimately, the culture across the centuries rejects this idea.
That math is a good training for the mind.
Well, in that it disappears, it flees the curriculum.
You're right.
Right. So people didn't ultimately buy what Plato and Isocrates were selling.
Okay. So what are the various sections in this chapter then?
Yes. So we have he goes through the various kind of subsections of
Right.
of math. So he's going to talk about geometry. He's going to talk about arithmetic. He's going to talk about music theory.
Yes.
And there too, yeah, music.
Did you enjoy that a little bit?
I did. I actually, and the stuff I liked most is when he talked about how when mathematics was popular in the curriculum was when it was connected to a kind of mysticism.
Yeah.
Right? And also astronomy. And then later on, he'll detail kind of how kind of scientific and mathematics studies kind of fall.
The decline of science
of
studies.
favor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally ends up with Aratus and his phenomena, right?
Yep.
The literary study of astronomy. So as we get into it then, on page 176, chapter 8, part 2, we have this section heading, The Teaching of Mathematics. Jeff, can you read us a little bit there from the second paragraph there?
Sure. When, in about the year 240 BC, Tellus tried to describe the trials of human life, it was the teachers of arithmetic and geometry that, together with the riding master, he chose as being typical of the secondary school stage of education, sandwiched between the primary school and the Aphobia. We have the same picture again 2 centuries later from the author of Axiokos. So he's saying that, for 240 BC,
Right.
Arithmetic and geometry were fairly embedded.
That's right. In the Hellenistic curriculum.
Yes.
Because the overarching theme of this book is that education as we know it in the West got its start during the classical era in Athens.
Yes.
Socrates and prior, but it got anchored in the Hellenistic era.
Yes.
Which is 336, death of Alexander, to say Augustus.
Yes.
31 BC.
Right. And I thought it was really interesting about how he breaks down about how all of this serves as the foundation for, in the medieval period, which become the seven arts, the trivium and the quadrivium.
That's right. So he says, continuing there, a list of the winners of school competitions in Magnesia ad Meandrum in the 2nd century BC mentions an examination in arithmetic. And since this occurs along with examinations in drawing, music, and lyric poetry, it puts mathematics in the category of secondary school education. So there you have it.
There you have it. Yeah.
I was recently at a basketball awards ceremony.
Yes.
One of my children was a basketballer this year. And one of the other teams featured a young man who received a basketball-ish award. He had done something really significant on the court.
Yeah.
And my wife, who knows many of these kids and their families, she said to me, he recently won a statewide mathematics competition. And I said, you mean for the homeschool arena? Because it was a homeschool setting. She said, no, he beat all of the others.
Gee.
Public school, private school, homeschool, he was first.
Wow.
And I said, why aren't they talking about that instead of his basketball achievement? So I found him later, right after the event. He didn't know me from Adam. I should say he didn't know me from Archimedes. And I said, hey, I heard you are a math superstar. And he humbly said, well, yeah, I suppose so. I said, that is phenomenal. We should be celebrating that tonight and not the basketballing.
Yeah.
I said, the basketball's good.
Right.
But nice work on the mathematics.
He's a mathlete.
That's right.
That's what he is. Yes.
He's a mathlete.
Yeah.
My main point was just to, I guess, surprise him a little bit.
Yeah.
Because when you're young, something like that, not appealing.
Right.
But when you're older, right, maybe he'll look back with fondness on his, I don't know, his math success.
I hope so. But yeah, I mean, I think also worked into that is, what does the culture value?
Yes, what do others value?
We're in the middle of March Madness, the great basketball team. We're not watching people solve equations.
No, but we should be
on ESPN.
We should be.
We should be.
So what's the enkuklios paideia? What's the enkuklios paideia in the second section?
Yes. So he says, theoretically, at least, the principle was never in any doubt. In the ideal syllabus of a good general education, enkuklios paideia, the Hellenistic Greeks would always put the mathematical sciences on the same level as language and literature. So we're still at this kind of this ideal that math and literature should be right up there together.
Right.
We find frequent allusions to this term, enkuklios paideia, in the writers of Greco-Roman times. This has nothing to do with anything encyclopedic, which is an entirely modern idea. The word itself came only into existence in the 16th century. The word encyclopedia evokes a picture of universal knowledge, and however elastic it may have been, enkuklios paideia never claimed to embrace the totality of human knowledge. It simply meant, in accordance with the accepted meaning of enkuklios in Hellenistic Greek, the usual everyday education received by all. For this reason, I suggest general education as a suitable translation.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Enkuklios paideia, general education.
Right.
So this is the 3 R's.
Yes.
Reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, this. I'm thinking back to the opening quote here, when he says the general education received by all. What do we do with that all? I mean, that the opening quote would seem to suggest, well, no, this wasn't for all. It was
originally intended as for all freeborn males, and maybe some females. Who had the leisure and opportunity to study these things.
Right.
So a highly circumscribed sense of all.
Yes.
But then eventually, mathematics seemed to kind of fade from the syllabus in that way.
Yes.
As he'll develop later on.
So one of the constant fights isn't the right word, but constant struggles teaching at a community college is finding courses that will transfer easily to four-year schools that will cover general education requirements,
right?
Which are always shifting a little bit.
The gen ed requirements?
The gen ed requirements, right? And the idea of what kind of education should everybody, no matter what you're going into, should receive.
Now, why do you think they are shifting?
Well, I mean, at Grand Rapids Community College, the major transfer institutions that our students go on to, if they go on, are Grand Valley State, Ferris State, and Western Michigan. And so when I propose a new course, the first question that I am asked is, okay, is this going to be a course that is going to be accepted at least 2 of those schools?
Right. Can I transfer?
Right?
Okay.
And so it's becoming, my sense over the last 10 years since I've been there, it's a more difficult needle to thread because different schools they're changing them. Some are kind of shrinking them, and some are actually expanding them.
They count?
What counts? And so, I find this debate fascinating of kind of what kinds of courses, what collections of courses under what subheadings should all students take courses to be considered to be broadly educated.
Yeah. Okay? So it's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore.
No. No, and so I was curious. I want to ask you.
Sure.
Is where do you think you said don't study the humanities to get a job?
No. But because it's fun.
Because it's fun, right? But how about another question is where would you say the humanities fall in that general idea of being generally educated?
Yes. Well, I think there are different kinds of people and different kinds of goals that those persons have. And if there's going to be something like a publicly funded education, I'm not going to pontificate on that point.
Yeah.
But there ought to be a basic, agreed upon minimum threshold that we all must meet in order to get out of that requirement.
Yes.
And I don't think it has to be especially high, right? Whatever it is, but you should be literate. You should be numerate. You can count. You can check your change from the restaurant, whatever.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it seems to me there should be lots and lots of opportunities by which people sort themselves. And if their parents aren't helping them, then someone is there to help them sort.
Right.
Which I have pretty much described, I think, what most people believe a public education already is or ought to be.
Yeah.
Even though I don't think it really matches that too well.
Yeah. No, I think right. But if I look at going through this process at GRCC, I think that's more or less what you just described is going on.
Yeah.
There are a zillion ways you can take care of your humanities requirement. Right. And so, but it's interesting. I don't know if you remember at the institution that we used to teach at.
To frequent.
I remember being part of faculty senate and the engineering department was constantly
don't get me started.
It was constantly upset about these gen ed requirements.
Yeah, they were constantly trying to expand their territory.
Yeah, that too.
And I was going to say, as were all the STEM disciplines.
Yes.
And the problem was that their argument in the narrow sense was a good one. Their argument was simply economic.
Yeah.
It was, our students need to have better competitive abilities.
Yes.
If you make them take a French class or a classical mythology course, they won't be able to compete with those who did not take those classes.
Right.
So I would never try to argue with them on those terms because it's patent. I don't think classical myth studying is going to make you a better engineer.
Right.
But I didn't accept that was the basis for the argument.
Yeah.
No, we're getting a little bit far afield here from Marrou, but I just want to ask you one more thing.
Please.
You must have had this experience in your many classes where you get someone in your class who comes from a strong STEM discipline.
Yes.
If I get an engineer, when I was teaching at that institution, an engineer, someone with a biochemistry major, something like that, better yet mathematics, I immediately knew that 9 out of 10 of those persons knew how to work hard. And if I told them to do something in terms of learning a list of Greek verbs or so forth, most of the time they would just do it without complaining or questioning it.
Yes.
And so I really liked having those students. Oftentimes they were kind of modest. They would say, well, I want to take Homer, but I'm just a math major. I don't know anything about it.
Right.
And I would try to correct that by saying, no, you don't understand. If you have the self-discipline that math might inculcate and an analytical mind,
yes,
you can really enjoy this in a way that might be challenging for others.
Right. Just like Marrou said, Plato and Isocrates said that mathematics is good for
so you accept
the training of the idea of the mind. Yeah, I think broadly speaking.
Okay.
I think that I can accept that, and also at the same time say that I'm terrible at math and have never enjoyed it. Right.
Well, I don't think that a mathematical training is sufficient, right, to appreciate literature in a certain way. You need something more.
Yeah.
But if you have that sort of background in analysis, it can help tremendously.
Yeah. Well, I've heard those arguments also made for why you should study Latin and Greek too. It will sharpen your analytical mind.
I think there's some truth to that.
I would agree with that too.
I've just always denied that that's the purpose of studying it.
Yeah.
If you want to get better at analysis, do Sudoku or I don't know, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Solve logic problems.
Right. It should be fun.
That's right.
It should be fun. Yeah.
Speaking of things, Jeff,
yes,
that should be fun.
Yes.
But maybe aren't always.
Yeah.
Time for the ads.
Right.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by the good people at Hackett Publishing. Hackett. Hackett Publishing, with offices in Indianapolis, Massachusetts, and Cambridge, Indiana. Jeff?
What? No, you flip those around.
Maybe I did that on purpose.
Okay. Well, Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay.
And Cambridge, Massachusetts.
All right, if you want to get technical.
Right.
These folks, for nigh unto 54 years, have been offering to the general public fantastic, high-quality translations of the classics.
That's right. I love them. I love the artwork. I love the affordability,
right,
and I love just the wonderful scholarship that I find in them. They do an incredible job that I haven't seen any other book publisher do it quite this well.
No, I think you're right.
Yep.
Other books they might say, well, we have more expensive cloth-bound copies.
Yeah.
Okay, good for you. We might have, I don't know, what else might they boast? It's hard to think, really.
I guess you could do it on the cheap, but then it looks and it feels cheap, and the Hackett books never do that.
No, they hit the sweet spot.
They do.
High quality scholarship with affordability, and it's very attractive. Now, last week we had on the show our wonderful colleague, Mr. Bromtenberg, who was talking to us about Tacitus.
Yes, he was.
And the writing of imperial history.
Yep.
As it turns out, dear listener, Hackett has a number of excellent titles from this very author.
Yes, they do. You can find a translation of Tacitus's Agricola, Germany, and Dialogue on the Orators. This is translated in an introduction by Herbert W. Benarlo.
Yes, Benario, I think.
Is it Benario? Yes.
Yes. I think actually Brom mentioned him on the air last
that's
week.
right. Yeah.
Famous guy.
Yeah, and then also you can find a translation of his Annals with notes and introduction by A.J. Woodman.
Right.
Okay? So
both of them quite affordable. So, for example, if you want to get a copy of the aforementioned from Benario that Jeff mentioned, $14 in a paperback.
Yeah.
And it's a handsome, nice black cover, good translation and introduction. Yep. The Annals, the Annales, translated by Woodman, you can get the $20 paperback version, very affordable, or you can treat yourself and get the cloth bound for $54.
So even from Hackett, if you want to be Mr. Mrs. Snooty,
that's right,
and get your cloth copy,
that's right,
they have those available as
that's
well.
Right. So go to Hackett.com, Hackett Publishing, Hackett Publishing.com.
Yep.
Check out their long list of titles from books and genres and eras all over the world. And when you get to the checkout, you put all your books in your little grocery packet.
Satchel.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Basket or bucket or pillowcase. And at checkout, you need to enter this code.
Yes, AN2025. So it's AN as in ad nauseum plus the current year. And listener, that will get you two amazing things. It will get you 20% off your entire order and free shipping.
Check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Man, I love these guys.
Do you really?
I do love them, yes.
So this morning I'm guessing that you brewed some coffee in your Ratio 6?
No, not my 6, I had my 8.
Oh, you had the 8?
Got the 8, yes.
That was at home.
That's the flagship. That's what I always start every day with.
And that was for you and Mrs. Winkle?
That's right.
Any little Winkles, any Winkleettes getting in on the coffee game?
No, still too young and don't understand it yet.
Yeah. So that's the Ratio 8. Mm-hmm. And then you went to the office.
Yes, I did.
And you brewed a second batch.
Yes, I did, in the Ratio 4.
So if you take the Ratio 8 and you add it to the Ratio 4,
yes,
then what do you have, Jeff?
You have 12?
You got the Ratio 12.
There's Ratio 12.
See?
You're asking me to do math?
Science. Right. You are the well-trained mathematician now ready for some literature.
And I suppose if you average those two, you're with a 6, right?
Oh, nice.
There we go.
See?
Yes.
So Joanna, our friend Joanna, who lives in west of the Mississippi somewhere, I think in the Colorados, if I remember, is going to be very soon enjoying her excellent cup of perfect brew in the Ratio 4.
Yes.
Now, for all of you out there, though, who are sad because your name didn't get drawn at random, and you're going to be missing out on the first affordable and beautiful half-batch pour-over coffee machine, the smallest brewer yet, an agile, sleek machine that puts out between 5 and 20 ounces of coffee per batch, enough for 1 to 2 reasonably sized cups or 1 big travel mug.
Yeah.
If you are that person, what should you do?
Well, you should go to ratiocoffee.com and check out one of these machines.
Slash
ad nauseum.
Ad nauseum.
That's us. Yes.
That's right.
Right. And if they do that, they will. If they again, you put in a coupon code. For the item that you want,
which is AN.
Yes.
Ratio 2025.
Yes, and that will get you $20 off your entire
any
order.
machine of your choice.
Right.
What are some other great features, Jeff, of the Ratio 4 as you think about it?
I love the removable water tank. That's my favorite part.
Okay.
I can take that off. I can walk
stroll down
the hall in my office, fill it up, and snap it back on. There's no kind of messy, pouring, awkward
it's
pouring.
Real clean, isn't it?
It's really, really nice, right?
And then how many buttons do you need to touch in order to avoid all of the snackish twang.
Well, I mean, you do have to go onto the website and get the secret code that usually takes about 20 minutes for them to email it to you. No, actually, none of
Nothing.
that. No,
Okay.
It's very simple. It's one touch.
One touch.
One touch. And as for our listeners who have been with us for a while, heard us talk for a long time about the 8 and the 6.
Yeah.
I would love that, but it's too rich for my blood.
They might say, that's really kind of out of reach.
Out of reach. The 4 might be exactly what you're looking for.
Exactly. And no more marsupods.
No more marsupods. That's probably the best part of it.
Ratiocoffee.com/ad nauseum. Check it out. Jeff, as we continue here with Marrou on page 177, let's talk geometry.
Yes, let me read a bit here.
Okay.
So geometry, Marrou writes, was the Greek science par excellence. And Euclid, who lived roughly between 330 and 275 BC, was its master. His elements are famous, directly or indirectly. They have been behind all the geometry taught not only to the Greeks, but to the Romans and Arabs and us moderns as well. Until recently, English schoolboys were using as their geometry textbook a translation of the elements that differed little from the original work. Now, I find
that is success.
That is astounding.
It is, really.
Right?
Can you imagine if 1,000 years from now they're reading Goodnight Moon as they're training in literature?
Right.
Heaven forbid.
Right. But that's incredible.
It is incredible.
Yeah. So, but he says that until recently, I don't know what's replaced Euclid.
I don't know.
I don't traffic in that.
You don't.
Field at all.
No, the most popular theology textbook of all time is Peter Lombard's Sentences, his Sententiae. And it only lasted about 400 years.
Wow.
But this thing, since Euclid's time, now we're going on 2,000 years.
Yes. Yeah, incredible. Yeah.
Marrou continues, the book is therefore so well known that there is no need to embark on any lengthy analysis of its contents and method.
I wrote in the margins, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I was thinking, come on, Jeff. Marrou can say this in the 1950s.
Yeah.
But I think you could ask 100 educated people now, what's in Euclid's elements?
Right.
They'd say, I don't know, hydrogen, helium, lithium. You got me,
It's at Euclid, don't you mean YouTube?
That's right.
What are you talking about? Right.
He says, essentially, it is a sequence of theorems with their attendant proofs based on a number of original definitions and aitemata, a term covering what we nowadays divide into axioms and postulates. You done any axiom and postulate dividing lately, Winkle?
I have not. I have to admit, for the rest of this paragraph, I think I started nodding off and started drooling on the page.
There's not enough racial coffee to keep you
attached
to this?
He's got a diagram of
the diagram's phenomenal
of triangles, isosceles, equilateral. I don't
all right.
get it.
Can I just read a little bit of it?
Okay, please.
All right. And I'm not saying I get it all.
Right.
There was a time when I got it, but that time's gone. Thus, in order to demonstrate that in an isosceles triangle, ABC, the angles ABC and ACB are equal. Your eyes are swimming?
I'm trying not to snore. Okay, please keep going.
Okay, right. All right. A fundamental property which we can easily prove by similar triangles, Euclid has to go a long way round. He extends AB and AC to D and E so that BD equals CE, and then he joins BE and CD so that ABE equals ACD, and BCD equals BCE, etc. And the rest just writes itself.
It does, exactly. Wow. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, it's astounding to me. It's fantastic that Euclid, this work, 2,000 years plus years, had such a long reach, long shadow. And I find that incredible.
Yeah.
But I am not.
No.
I'm not going to be picking up a copy for my bedtime reading.
Okay.
Well, actually, for bedtime reading, it might actually work quite well.
Put you to sleep. There was one class at my undergrad institution.
Yes.
That, I didn't do great in a lot of classes the first couple of years. In fact, it wasn't until I came to the study of Greek and Latin that I began to excel.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I was a solid B- to B+ kind of student.
What were you, at that point, before you kind of discovered the classes, did you have an idea of I'm going to go into this?
I came in wanting to study physics and computer science.
Okay.
And that's because in my high school, literature was not taught at a high level. Now, looking back, there were some good literature teachers in middle school and grade school, but for whatever reason, I didn't hit upon them for the most part in high school.
Yeah.
But the math and science classes were full throttle. There were some great teachers.
Yeah.
So I was really drawn to that.
Gotcha. Yes.
But anyway, the one class that I was in originally and had to drop because I was doing so poorly was calculus.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. Because that was the gateway to physics or astronomy or computer science. And so I regret that I bailed on calculus.
Man, I remember in high school, my biggest motivation for doing well in my math classes was so I didn't have to take it in college.
So you wouldn't have to do it later.
Yes, exactly. And I did not take one math class as an undergraduate.
Yeah. So how about the final paragraph on page 178, a portion of that? Because I think it makes an excellent point we ought to contemplate.
Sure. These problems were purely speculative, of course. Practical applications involving numbers, calculations of surfaces and volumes did not belong to geometry, but to subjects like geodesy or metrics. And these had a place in education too. A few textbooks about them have come down to us. There are some by Hieron of Alexandria written in the 2nd century AD, for instance. And then there are papyri with actual examples of the exercise that pupils had to do. But this kind of education was only for future practitioners, surveyors, contractors, engineers, masons, being technical instruction. It did not form part of a liberal education and remained outside the realm of mathematics proper.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
It almost kind of gets into that divide between of the skill center education.
Dirty jobs. What other people do.
Right, yes. Masons.
Correct.
Right? That's a dirty job, quote unquote. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of room here for stereotypes, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're studying mathematics at Princeton? Yes, I am. Do you know how to build a fence? A what? Right.
right.
I've never heard of that.
Right.
I think those stereotypes are probably way overplayed.
Sure.
Because you have to have some mathematical knowledge to do things like build a fence, right?
Of course.
But there's a different motivation, I guess, and I think it'd be foolish to imagine that the different motivations don't lead to different ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the motivation of the person studying pure mathematics is to understand things, I guess, in the abstract.
Yes.
And the motivation of someone building a fence is to use mathematics only to the extent that he or she needs it to get the fence built.
Exactly. Yeah.
So different motivations are going to yield different end results,
right?
At least in general.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I have a nephew who graduated with an engineering degree and got a job at a firm right away. And he's much more practical minded. He's much more interested that what he learned will produce a physical product that will improve lives, right?
Yeah.
And I remember him saying,
and that's valuable.
That's very valuable. But I remember him saying to me is that where technology comes into this is that you have to take all of these high level math courses for your engineering degree, but he says like so much of the technology that you actually use in the practical building of these things almost renders it moot. It's almost like it's
done on your behalf.
The AI does it for you. Yeah.
Do you think a similar thing is coming to the study of literature?
I don't know. I'm eager, but also kind of nervous to see where AI, what cracks it finds its way into. Yeah.
Well, we're near enough to the end of our careers. We won't have to worry about it.
Yeah, right.
We'll climb up and pull up the ladder behind us, as they say.
Right. Yeah.
So we go on from geometry, and the next topic is arithmetic.
Yes.
And I'll read a little bit here from Marrou because I think this is absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
The same applies to arithmetic. It was the theoretical science of numbers, and so, following Plato's advice, it disdained real-life problems. Like those set in modern primary schools, profit and loss, buying and selling. Do you remember the endless push towards story problems?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I guess the theory of a story problem is we're going to make this relevant.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, right.
So instead of just teaching you how to come up with an equation, I don't know, x plus 2 times y plus 4, and you have to combine them in some magical way.
Yeah.
You have to talk about how Johnny goes to the store to buy, a ball for Sally, but he only has $2.50.
Yes.
And on the way home, he's got to buy some magic beans and sell his cow and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
How did those land on you, those story problems?
I thought it was just a kind of a lame attempt to try to create a narrative.
Thinly veiled attempt
that's right.
to pull you in and then beat you over the head with real math.
If I had to be honest, I thought I probably, it's been years since I've done a story problem, but I probably found that as a much more interesting way of kind of thinking about things, right? I had a friend.
But it was never treated like a story.
No.
In the sense that if you were to ask questions, well, why is Johnny going to the store in the first place? And, is he sweet on Sally?
Right.
The teacher would immediately steer you away back to the numbers.
Yeah, right. I had a friend who was, still is, a math teacher in high school, and had a story. He talked about a story problem that began, you're at a baseball game, and had something like calculating, how many people were in the stands.
Okay.
And the student wrote on a test back said, I've never been to a baseball game, therefore I cannot answer this question.
I love those. Images that make the rounds online. Find X. Here it is.
There it is.
Yeah,
that's great.
Those are funny. Says Marrou, because it lacked the necessary symbols, Greek arithmetic was unable to reach the same level of universality and perfection as Greek geometry. As we have already noted, the Greeks used letters for numbers, there being 3 groups of 9 signs each, 1 group for the units, 1 for the tens, and 1 for the hundreds. When an iota was added underneath on the left, this meant thousands. Theoretically, therefore, the system provided for all whole numbers from 1 to 999,999.
Now, this I found really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think if I had to zero in on one thing that was the major handicap in the handcuffs,
right,
was this limitation.
Yes.
So maybe that's one of the core reasons that Greek mathematics never kind of really took root
in the same way that geometry did.
Yes.
So here's an analog. You might know the social commentator, the conservative gentleman, Thomas Sowell.
Of course.
So he writes this work that I really enjoyed, Conquests and Cultures.
Yeah.
And he points out that in many South American cultures, pre-Columbian, so before the arrival of Columbus, the children of those cultures had toys which featured a wheel, right? There was a wheel on these toys.
Yes.
So they had the concept, but there were no wheeled vehicles in pre-Columbian South American civilization.
Huh.
And the reason is they didn't have the animals that could pull it. There was not a single pack animal that could pull a heavily loaded cart.
Yeah.
The closest they got was the llama. You ever seen a llama pulling a Toyota?
I would like to see that.
I don't think so. The llama is not large and heavy and strong enough like an ox, a horse, water buffalo, an elephant. Many other cultures all around the world had draft animals,
right?
But those in South America before Columbus, they had the llama.
Yeah.
So the technology was there, the wheel, but it was limited in another sense because they lacked another piece.
Yes.
And that explains a lot of differences in development.
Yeah.
So I think that's an analog here to the idea
definitely. Yeah, that's great.
The Greeks just didn't have the tools they needed to manipulate numbers.
Right. I there's a part from the next paragraph which I got to read because I found this very interesting. Right. So the Greeks, in fact, did not like writing down any number higher than 100,000.
Isn't that
so
interesting?
they could go to just one shy of a million.
I'm done.
I'm done.
I'm out.
Exactly. Unlike the Indian mathematicians of the 4th and 5th centuries AD, who loved speculating on enormous numbers like 1,577,917,828.
Now, why did he pick that number?
I don't know. I thought that was great.
I think maybe the French lottery was up to that point right then. And Marrou just looked out his window and said, I'm settling on that.
Yes. And then the way he finishes the sentence, too, he says, which would have made the Greeks shudder with the fear of aperon, the terror of infinity.
Yeah.
So the Greeks, they didn't like
they
writing.
Were scared
they were
of the
just
notion
terrified.
of infinity.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that Halmer just drops it there, but that's why I want to know more
About the aperon?
Yes.
Why is infinity so terrifying?
Well, I mean, I kind of get that.
I would say the Lexus is terrifying, the Acura maybe, but the infinity?
That's a very sensible, practical vehicle. Right. I remember there were elements of mathematics that did fascinate me, like an irrational number.
Oh, yeah.
Which never ends.
I'm still fascinated by that.
Yeah.
And I'm a little afraid of it. I had a friend once explain to me irrational numbers on a cocktail napkin.
You did?
Yes.
Yeah.
A very smart young woman, a math major from Calvin. Unfortunately, I then used it to get the spaghetti sauce off my mouth. And
you lost it forever.
That was it.
Right? Yeah.
But this is interesting, too, because when he mentions the Indian mathematicians of the 4th and 5th centuries, maybe this is a well-known fact. All of the world record holders for memorizing digits of pi are Indian.
Is that right?
Every last one of them.
Oh, my goodness.
Indian culture to this day has a fascination with numbers and a high degree of cultural development. All of the numerical prodigies practically are Indian.
That's really interesting.
And I don't know why.
Are you familiar with the book and or the movie Life of Pi?
Yes.
Right. So
there's something, there's a tiger in it.
Yes, right. Yeah. It's really quite a wonderful story. But the main character who goes by Pi, his real name is the French word for a swimming pool, piscine.
Oh.
But he gets teased because piscine in English sounds like something. You know,
like urination.
Right. So he is trying to, in that story, he tries to convince people to call him Pi rather than piscine. And the way that he impresses, he kind of wins over the crowd, is that he memorizes pi out to hundreds of digits, and he puts it on chalkboards, and he kind of becomes kind of a hero.
Interesting.
How that dovetails with what you're saying is of Indians having the record for memorizing the most. It's right, that story kind of jumps on that. Yeah.
The next paragraph, Marrou says, Greek arithmetic, therefore, must be regarded as the science of arithmos in the strict sense, i.e. the science of whole numbers.
Yeah.
No fractions, no decimals, no irrational numbers, just whole numbers. Here again, Euclid's Elements give us a very useful idea of the matter, but the textbook which has the greatest historical influence, was the Introduction to Arithmetic by Nicomachus of Gerasa, about AD 100. This was immediately adopted by the teaching fraternity, written about at great length, and translated into Latin and later into Arabic. Its influence was so great that arithmetic took the place of geometry as the basis and the most important part of mathematics.
But still,
squeeze it out.
But still, very quite limited. If we're just talking about whole numbers, there's worlds of mathematics that can't touch.
That's right. And if you started talking about infinity, the Greek students would flee the school in abject dread.
Exactly, or just go fetal and just start twitching.
Right. Anything but infinity.
Right.
How about page 180, Jeff, before we get to music?
Yeah.
You're going to love this.
So which part are you pointing to? I'll read it.
Along with this?
Yeah, sure. Along with all this, which seems to go into such curious detail, but is nevertheless quite a legitimate part of mathematics, went even stranger investigations into the qualitative and aesthetic properties of number. I do not mean the classification of compound numbers, that is, numbers of which are the products of several factors, which had begun with Pythagoras, and which can be seen, as can be seen in Nicomachus, was developed in Hellenistic times to a high degree of precision. I gotta skip it.
What?
He's starting to lose
planar
me. Numbers,
solid numbers,
right?
Triangular and rectangular numbers.
But so without going into all of that incredible vocabulary, he's talking about how numbers were seen as particularly as aesthetically pleasing or particularly mystical.
Yes,
right.
Do you not remember encountering numbers as a kid and just thinking that 8? That's an incredible number.
The 8?
Yeah.
Oh, if you flip it on its side, you got the infinity symbol.
Oh, right? You do. Right. And you know the old kid's joke? What did the 0 say to the 8?
What is it again?
Nice belt. Nice belt. No, but in the middle there, to pick up Marrou, then there were the speculations, sometimes disarmingly childlike, on the marvelous properties of the first 10 numbers, the decade, on which the whole series of numbers is based. The ancients went into raptures over the virtues of unity, the primary source of all things, individual, immutable, never losing its nature, however much it is multiplied. 1 times 1 equals?
1.
1. And you can do that forever, and it never changes. Right. Isn't that fascinating? No, it leaves you cold.
No, it's a little cold.
I think it's interesting. Right. The perfection of the number 3. It's the first one that has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
There we go. Right.
Not interesting to you?
Not interesting. I thought a little later he talks about how certain numbers were seen as kind of more perfect than others.
Right.
So if you take like the number 28, he mentions that if you take all the numbers that you can divide, that divisible
7, 4,
right,
1.
and if you add them all up, it equals 28.
That is phenomenal.
So there's a perfection.
Can
there.
that be a coinky-dink, as they say? I don't think so.
I don't know, man. I remember one thing that always, I think this goes along with kind of the fascination with irrational numbers, but kind of the story problem. You have a frog. The frog jumps halfway across the table,
yes,
and then jumps another half,
right,
and keeps jumping another half. The frog will never reach the end.
Oh
of the
yeah,
table,
this is Parmenides,
right? Yeah, right.
This is it's a Zeno of Elea.
Okay.
It's his. The archer and the arrow, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
If you fire an arrow and Achilles starts running.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a famous paradox.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
Okay.
Maybe come around.
All right.
Regretting not doing a math minor.
There's still time. I can go back and do some calculus and make good after all these years.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to music as we get close to the end here?
Yes,
this is a subject dear to your heart.
Indeed. Yep. So, this reminded me of debates that you have about learning an instrument, approaching an instrument. How much music theory should you have, and how much of your musicianship should be just kind of go by feel.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think one of the reasons I find music fascinating is that it definitely has a foot in the mathematical,
okay,
but it also has a foot in the mystical,
right?
And the mingling of those two is endlessly fascinating to me. Yeah.
So music is that realm where the analytic and the creative meet.
Right. And in the Western tradition, it really does come from the Greeks. It comes from having strings of different lengths. And
you got your Phrygian mode.
Yes, you got your Dorian, you got your Mixolydians.
Yes.
Right. But stretching a string of different length and a different tension, I recognize kind of the intervals between particular tones, right? And understanding that in a mathematical kind of way. It's a precursor to looking at the layout of a piano keyboard, how these notes relate to one another.
Do you like to listen to 12-tone music and?
I can appreciate it. It's
that?
Not my favorite to listen to, but
okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to read us a little bit about what he says concerning Pythagoras and octaves and so forth?
Sure. So from Pythagoras too derived the third of the mathematical sciences. And we should say, so Pythagoras, he mentions quite a lot. And Pythagoras too is also one of these figures that is remembered in terms of mathematics, but he was
force of nature.
But he was also, Pythagorism is also deeply mystical.
Yes, right? We should do a podcast on his vegetarian. Oh, we already did that.
Did we do that? We did that.
Yes, no meat for me, please. We're
Pythagoreans. That's right.
The Science of Strings, which is recorded for us in Plato, where he's talking about Pythagoras inventing this.
Yes. So from Pythagoras too derived the third of the mathematical sciences, the science of the numerical laws governing music. There is a great deal of writing at various intervals between Aristoxenus and Boethius that enables us to develop a very clear idea of the extent of the knowledge that was gained in this field. The science of quote-unquote music had two parts, intervals and rhythm. The first, harmonics or canonics, analyzed the numerical relationship between the different intervals of the scale. 2/1 signified the octave, 3/2 a fifth, 4/3 a fourth, and so on and so forth. And so there too you get that the basis of modern musical nomenclature of particular types of chords. Is it a fifth chord, a seventh chord? Is it a major chord? Is it a minor chord? All of that has to do with the relationship of the intervals that you are playing. Yeah,
we must have some. I imagine not only some very musically accomplished listeners, but I bet we have some mathematicians and scientists in our audience who can probably correct us and hopefully will if we have misrepresented anything.
Yeah.
And can maybe even extend the argument a little bit here.
Please.
If they'd like to do so.
Yes.
Right next, Marrou says, all these numerical relationships can be found today in treatises on acoustics, but the acoustic treatises, describe the different wave frequencies of each sound. The ancients had no direct way of measuring the frequency of sound vibrations, but they managed to do so indirectly by measuring the length of the vibrating string or sounding pipe on a monochord. The discovery of the relationships between the various lengths was one of the greatest achievements of Greek science, and it is understandable that not only the Pythagoreans, but all the thinkers of antiquity were absolutely fascinated by it. Here's the payoff sentence. They had managed to connect numbers, definite and indeed simple numbers like 2, 3/2, etc., with subjective impressions and aesthetic values. Proper intervals, harmonies, the octave, the fifth, etc. How could anyone doubt after this that number was the key to the cosmos and the whole universe based on it?
Right. From that, even later, you get even the notion of like the music of the spheres. Right. It's mathematical.
That's right.
Yeah.
Even though numbers are entirely abstract, speculative.
Yes.
Obviously, when you look at your fingers, you see a set number of them, but to abstract from that the notion of 4 fingers or 5 and then be able to manipulate them in your mind.
Right.
It's really a remarkable thing.
Yeah, it is. And then the combination of those numbers into tones, right? I find endlessly fascinating the idea that just the idea that a major intervals make you feel happy and minor ones make you feel sad.
That's right.
You're kind of trafficking in something a little bit more mystical,
right?
But it's rooted in these very distinct mathematical intervals.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I always find fascinating is Marrou talks about how Greeks, of course, didn't have acoustic wave theory.
No, they couldn't figure that out.
But it reminds me in class talking about the innovation of the theater space. So they create these places that are acoustically perfect.
Right, all done with the ear.
All done with the ear, and with kind of an intuitive notion of kind of how sound works. The way that those underneath each seat, it's rounded.
Yes, it's concave. So it amplifies and echoes back the sound.
Right. So how the Greeks just kind of intuitively got how sound works, but without modern acoustic sound theory.
Well, I think that they had. Yes, that's for sure. To me, it's the lack of instrumentation for measurement, right? Because they had some mathematics for this, but they weren't able precisely to measure the kinds of things that they were doing.
Right.
The only instrument to measure was the ear.
Right.
That's phenomenal.
Exactly. Yeah.
You remember being at Epidaurus.
Of course.
And standing there in the center by the orchestra, and you're up at the very top level, and it's like someone is whispering in your ear, even though they're a great distance away.
Exactly. Now, if someone was sitting next to you, like chomping on popcorn, or if there's a sausage seller walking up and down, that changes things.
Practicing his technique.
Right. Exactly. But yes, it's incredible about how near that sound it is right in front of your face. Yeah.
Well, we can't leave this lovely chapter of Marrou without talking a little bit about astronomy and astrology. So just a few pages of this, and then we'll wrap it up. So, Jeff, what's the payoff quote here in Marrou's section on astronomy?
Yes, Marrou writes, of the 4 branches of mathematics, astronomy was the most popular, the one that aroused most curiosity. It was not a purely theoretic interest, for it was inseparable from the increasing popularity of astrology in Greco-Roman society. In fact, the terms astrology and astronomy seem to have been more or less interchangeable. A genuine scholar like Ptolemy could put his name not only to an authentic treatise on astronomy, like the Almagestes, but also to a book on astrology, his well-known Tetrabiblos. So there too, it seems that astronomy, why was it the most popular? Because it bleeds into
something practical or mystical.
The literary, right? And so it leads you to the constellations, which leads you to mythology.
Right.
And so maybe even in that we can start to see maybe even the seeds of the decline of these sciences, because as it fades away and literary studies come to the fore.
Do you remember any of your childhood mathematics textbooks?
No, not a one.
What the covers were like?
I don't.
Well, I can't remember any specific ones, although I have some kind of vague images rattling around in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But my impression is that they all tried really hard to look enticing.
Yes. Okay.
Something like prisms and rainbows, or some of them were cartoony, like numbers on a landscape jumping over trees and so forth.
Right.
And I think that it, again, was just an effort to bring something relatable to kids.
Yes.
I wonder if such a thing works. I don't know. I'm not the publisher of such books, obviously, nor an artist.
Right. Yeah. But
the base appeal to here you're going to use your abstract intelligence.
Yes.
Probably not going to cut it.
No, it's not going to cut it. You have to tie it to some sort of story to some degree. Yeah. I think that's exactly what we're seeing here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then all good things must come to an end.
Yes.
And so Marrou says in the next section, the decline of scientific studies.
Yes.
And I'm quoting from page 183. Theoretically, according to Plato and Aristotle, and according to the Hellenistic formula enkukleos paideia, remember that's the general education, mathematics was bound to be included in any truly liberal education. The question is, was this so in practice? Who was supposed to be taught mathematics? Everybody or a specialist elite? Did it form part of secondary school education as it was supposed to in theory, or was it entirely for the more advanced students? Marrou says this question is not easily answered.
Right. But he suggests that ultimately mathematics comes to be seen as, if you're going to do further study, it was for elite later education.
That's right.
Right. And so we get that as we kind of start talking about, it's almost the opposite of what we see today. In kind of broad education, mathematics, science kind of gives way to literature.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I just want to quote here from the physician Galen. The physician Galen, this is also 183, who was born in Pergamus. So this is not a quote from Galen, of course, but it is Marrou talking about him, who was born in Pergamus in AD 129, likewise tells us in an interesting treatise which he called My Own Writings, that in his youth he studied not only grammar, dialectics, and philosophy, subjects he later wrote about at great length, but geometry, arithmetic, and its practical applications, logistics. So that continued to be the well-rounded education for the elite, right? Because Galen went on to be the most famous physician, the most famous doctor of all time.
Yeah. But Marrou's honest about some of the blank spots here. Is that he does an admirable job of trying to paint a whole picture of what Hellenistic and later education looked like. But he also admits is that sometimes you're just relying on bits and pieces from scattered parts of the empire. It's really hard to have a coherent picture of everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So for the closing quote, Jeff, from Marrou, can you pick it up on 185? This is the second to last little paragraph on 185. I think it would serve as a nice conclusion to Marrou.
Sure. As a result of this process, classical education developed in the Hellenistic age was what was to be one of its essential features. For nothing is more characteristic of classical tradition, as we can see from the influence it has had and still has on our own education, that the predominance of literature and the dislike of mathematics as a basis for general education. Mathematics may be respected and admired, but it is for the experts. It demands a particular vocation.
That seems surprisingly modern, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. Really, really good stuff. Excellent. But Dave, we are up against it.
Is there some reason we have to get out of here?
But I'm smelling sausage.
Yes? Okay,
the other side of the
sausage
door.
seller coming down
Exactly.
I was wondering if maybe someone was coming by to check and make sure we had one of those little golf pencils in our protractor.
Oh, really?
I had the most difficulty as a kid remembering which was the protractor and which was the compass.
Oh, you mixed those up in your mind?
I did. The
Yeah.
compass, is the compass thing that little half circle with the lines that you use to measure angles?
No, that's the protractor.
That's the protractor.
The compass has got the deadly point.
The deadly point with the pencil.
That you can
That's
blind your
that's
friend
the
with?
compass.
That's the compass, right?
But you never had the right size pencil for that.
That's right. Exactly. So
And like
somebody's
you said,
concerned that
yeah,
we
it was mostly for stabbing your buddy in the arm.
That's right. Exactly.
Can you believe they gave out such deadly tools to little kids like us?
Pretty sure they don't do that anymore.
The only thing I ever succeeded in doing with it's a compass was putting lots of holes in my paper.
Well, yeah, how could you not if you're sitting there, right?
That's right.
You're going to puncture something.
So those folks want to get in here as well as the sausage sellers.
Exactly. And I hear them kind of squabbling out there.
That's their techne. So we have to yield the space. But before we do...
Yep. Dave, how should our listeners go about learning some Latin and Greek if that's indeed what they want to do?
Right. Well, they should go to latinperdiem.com.
Yes.
The Moss Method website is retired, but not the program. The program is going strong. In fact, we met just this morning for office hours, and we had folks from Switzerland, California, Wisconsin, Michigan, New York, and I think that about wraps it up.
Fantastic. Man.
But we were reading some Xenophon about the people who live underground. We should do that sometime on his Anabasis.
Yeah.
The people that live underground and they keep their livestock down there too.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So go to latinperdiem.com. Check out some of my Greek offerings. Check out some of my Latin offerings. We have a couple of really interesting new features I'd like to mention. The first is at latinperdiem.com, you can take a free challenge exam. This is a 299 question, multiple choice, comprehensive quiz on your Latin vocabulary, drawn from Caesar, Cicero, Sallust, Nepos, etc., and see just how strong your Latin vocab is.
Yeah.
And when you get to the end of the quiz, you'll get a 15% coupon off any one of my courses.
Fantastic.
Nice, huh?
I like it.
Also on the YouTube channel, I'm doing a new series called Master Latin Style Like Erasmus. And we've got 3 videos out so far. They're teaching you about antithesis, about syntax, and so forth. One of them, I'm pleased to say, has gotten quite a bit of attention. So if you want to learn how to increase your ability with Latin, I would encourage you to check out that YouTube series.
Fantastic.
We got some people to thank.
Of course. We got Mishka, our wonderful engineer, turning these things around so quickly and making us sound so good. We got Ken Tamplin and Scott Benzen, the wonderful musicians.
That's right.
They are behind the music, the bumper music.
They probably know a few things about strings, don't you think, and string theory?
Definitely. I'd love to hear what they think about kind of that combination between the mathematical and the mystical.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Got a little bit of different bumper music. I guess this would be the outro music coming up. So if you usually zone out at this point, you're going to want to stick around.
Excellent. Yes.
Jeff, what if they want to get in touch with you and they want to complain that they got shafted in the ratio drawing?
Yes, they can complain to me. That's jeff@adnauseum.com. Don't forget the V. And they can also complain to you.
Yes, they could write to me, dave@adnauseum.com. Don't forget the V both in Dave and in nauseum.
Yep, check out our website, adnauseum.com. Again, don't forget the V. And pick yourself up a hat or a T-shirt or a sticker.
It's all at Lurch with Merch.
Yes.
Adnauseum.com.
Show that you are taking in the classics and
keeping them down.
That's right.
Jeff, for next week, I think it's another TBD, isn't it?
It is a TBD.
We're going to keep we're going to keep the audience guessing a little bit. This will be episode 180.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
180. But you have the gustatory parting shot to take us out.
I do. It's a little selfish on 2 levels.
What?
One is that I got to bring in some more Aristophanes.
Yes.
Right. And second, I'm bringing this in from my own translation of the frogs. Right.
And third, may I say?
Please. What's the third?
We covered a little bit of this before.
We did, yes.
But never as...
Not as gustatory parting shot, right?
So I think that's legit.
Right,
Lay it on us.
This is a very short passage from Aristophanes' Frogs, and just a brief setup. Dionysus in this episode, or in this scene, he is longing to go down into the underworld to bring Euripides back from the dead, and he's trying to kind of explain this longing to Heracles. So Dionysus says to Heracles, "Don't make fun of me, brother. I'm feeling faint. This urge, I tell you." And Heracles says, "Oh, go on, little brother. Explain it to me." Dionysus, "I don't know if I can. Let me see. Have you ever, say, had a deep craving for, say, a big heaping bowl of beef and bean stew?" Heracles reacts, "Beef and bean stew? Only about a gazillion times." Dionysus, so you get that? Should I try another metaphor?" Heracles says, "No, sir. When you talk beef and bean stew, you're talking my language."
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.